Hey everyone, welcome back or welcome to Tilly Talks Tech. My name is Tilly Lockie, I am your host, and I am so excited for today's episode because we all know that the drummer is the coolest in the band. Then imagine a drummer with a prosthetic arm. Mind blown. Welcome back to Tilly Talks Tech. On a real note, I am super excited for today's episode because we're talking about when technology doesn't only assist creativity but actually becomes part of it. My guest today is Jason Barnes, a drummer, innovator, and someone who, like myself, actually co-designed his prosthesis to do exactly what he needed it to. After losing his arm in an accident, Jason didn't just return to music. He helped create a robotic drumming arm that can play faster than is actually humanly possible. It knocks human hands out the water. Jason's work sits at the intersection of music, engineering, disability, and identity. And honestly, his story challenges a lot of assumptions about limitation, ability, and what tech is really for. Let's go chat to Jason. Welcome, Jason, to Tilly Talks Tech. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for making time to be here with me today. Like, you just showed me around this whole studio setup that you got. It's low-key better than mine. High-key better than mine, actually. Let's not even lie. What have you been up to? How are you feeling?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. Really stoked on that. Quite a bit. All music and nonprofit related for the most part.
For anybody who doesn't know, like, what it is that you do, let's start at the beginning, like before the tech, before any sort of robotic arm or whatever. How was music to you growing up? Like, how did you get started with that, and how did drumming in particular first come into your life?
I've been intrigued by music from a very young age. My dad was a fairly well-known guitarist in Australia. Yeah, so growing up, I always kind of watched my dad play guitar and listen to some of his bands, and started playing guitar first, maybe when I was like 11 or 12, and I just never really vibed with it, I guess. Again, ADHD probably played a big part in that. My parents were finally sick of me just tapping on the table all the time at dinner. And so when I was 14 or 15, my parents had went in on a drum kit for me for Christmas. The first day I got it, I was grooving to, BB King and stuff like that, and kind of knew I was like, man, this is really fun. And I felt like I was good at it. It was kind of a natural, and the rest is history from there.
That's so cool. And you said you were like 14, 15 when you started with like drumming in particular, or is that just when you got the kit?
That's when I got the kit, and that's when I really started playing drums. But again, being a kid and the excitement, let's start a band with my friends, and I got a friend that plays guitar, and I didn't have, I guess, the diligence to practice enough and really learn my craft.
Yeah, I feel that heavily because I have literally, since the day I witnessed the band, I will admit my first band I probably witnessed was One Direction, which probably isn't to your taste, but I've always been drawn to the drummer. I feel like the drummer does not get enough attention, and it just seems like the coolest instrument in the band. And I'm not even just saying that because you're a drummer. It got to the point where I was like, I want to learn drums. You just gave me a little bit of hope there, thinking that you just started drumming at 14, 15, because obviously you're an incredible drummer. And I fished out some money for a drum kit spontaneously, impulsively, one day when I think I was 16. And I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to learn to play drums. But it is way more difficult than it looks. Learning to drum is one thing. It is difficult to do. But then also, you obviously went through an accident, which meant that you, lost a hand as well. You're an amazing drummer at this point, and then you went through that. How is it that you lost that hand, and what was that adjustment like for you?
22, as I said, I played drums since I was 14. I was involved in an electrical accident at work. I used to clean restaurant exhaust, and it was kind of a wrong place, wrong time scenario, freak accident, and was up on a roof, and transformer edge of the building, probably, I don't know, 6 feet away from me, exploded. Something had spooked me, and I yelled, "Get down!" And as soon as I did, he remembers a pink flash and an explosion. And so I guess the electricity had went into my back and my left side. And I was wearing rubber boots, rubber waders. And so I'm not grounded. And so that's why the electricity does the most damage. And so it passed through me and knocked him down. And when he got up, I was still on the ground, basically just extremely burnt and seizing. Ultimately, that led to me being hospitalized for about 5 weeks and the amputation of my right hand.
When was the point where you realized, wait, you were going to lose your hand after this event?
So I was in the hospital for about 4 weeks, roughly, after about 6 or 7 surgeries. We had kind of decided that there was nothing really left to save. We could try and save my hand. It could be a 10-year process. I might not be able to even pinch things anymore. And obviously my hand would be, just deformed and not really work. And my other option was to amputate and leave the hospital in about a week. And so, I kind of weighed my options. I had a few different prosthetists come in and talk to me, and some friends, and, watched some cool videos of some bionic arms and things like that. And kind of decided, it wasn't the end of the world. I was born left-handed, and ultimately I was losing my right hand below the elbow. And with the amount of electricity I took, I should have lost all 4 of my limbs. So, I consider myself insanely lucky.
A long time to recover, and that's just something nobody wants to get into, but it's quite cool that you made that choice, But we figure it out. If there's one thing I know amputees are very good at, it's adapting, right? How did you get through that time? What was your main sort of goal during that time to help you through it?
I finally, after about a week of playing video games every day, I was just like, I can't live like this. Something has to change. I was insanely depressed. And, without telling anybody, I went out to the garage and I drug my drum kit out, and I set it up, and I taped a drumstick to my, I used tape, and a combination of tape and like a plastic bag, I think, so the tape wouldn't rip my hair off. And I taped the drumstick to my bloody stump, and proceeded to play, not very well, but that was just like a big turning point for me. Just kind of realizing that this is possible. I can still swing my arm around, I can still do this, like with the help of maybe some prosthetics or some things, there's a way to do this. And that moment right there it kind of just all clicked in my head. And I had kind of at the same time accepted what had happened to me and realized that my only options were to sit here and be miserable and moan the whole time, or do something about it. That was the big point where I kind of changed my mind and my outlook and accepted what had happened to me, and decided, like, this is possible. Let's move forward.
Hell yeah, we love to see it. That was going to be my next question, actually, whether you did try drumming again without a prosthetic, because that's what I did. And by the way, can I just say that is a very clever idea, to use the plastic bag to cover the hair, because the amount of times I've been waxed with freaking sellotape is a meh. After that point, and after all of that clicked in your head, you were on a mission, right? Because after that you went on to co-develop an incredible drumming prosthetic with Georgia Tech, is that right?
Actually had an activity arm, which is the arm that I built for playing drums before I had a normal arm. So that's how dead set I was on making it happen. And so I had gotten fitted with a socket. It was okay, and I heavily modified the device over the course of 6 months. The spring and some bearings and a few other different pivot points that essentially allowed me to have 2 pivot points. So one would be where my wrist is, and one would be where my fingers are. And it allowed me to be able to play pretty much, anything you would think of on the radio, very just solid kind of music. Issues got in where we got into technicality. And so jazz, for instance, with that pickup note, da, 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 once that gets to a certain speed, if I'm not able to control the grip strength of the stick, which you do in real time by your fingers in your hand, then it kind of falls apart. And so I had some limitations there of how I could play. I kind of was just I've been a nerd growing up my whole life. I've always thought robotics were interesting. I loved Star Wars, loved Terminator, and those kinds of things. And so I just kind of had this idea of hey, they have these EMG Myo hands that can control things. What about using something like that with the help of robotics to be able to control the grip strength on the stick? And so my teacher was intrigued by it. He informed me that he taught private lessons to a student from Georgia Tech. That student worked for the music technology department there, who was led by Professor Gil Weinberg. My teacher said he was going to try and connect us, and it just so happened that Gil Weinberg was kind of looking for his next project, and he built artificially intelligent musical robots, and I essentially needed to build an artificially intelligent musical robot, except as a prosthetic on my arm. And so Gil was insanely intrigued by the idea, and that was kind of the start of my journey when it comes to those types of prosthetics.
That's so cool. And I love that you just were I'm gonna make this work, didn't have experience engineering or doing any of this thing, but we're just gonna figure it out, and found people who could make it happen, and bang, what do you know, you got this sick prosthetic. And am I right to say that there is AI in this?
We utilized machine learning and deep learning algorithms for our quote unquote AI, And so
Mm.
what that does is it essentially is able to compile large amounts of data in this nifty little thing that you can kind of comprehend as a human, right? And
Sure.
so we used deep learning to collect as much data as we could from my muscles, my other arm, et cetera, to then kind of let that correlate in the prosthetic itself. So it uses AI, but not in the sense of that it's trying to generate something. It uses AI in the sense that we have these, think of it as a large language model, but
Mm.
for data for the prosthesis
Yeah.
that will determine what I want to do with the prosthesis. And then the first version of the arm, we had got a grant from the National Science Foundation, and they had wanted more AI involved. And so we had the option of having a second stick that I could control when it was not playing. And that second stick would then kind of utilize the same algorithms that Shimon, one of the other AI robots, used, to where it could improvise in real time. So from a technological standpoint, incredible. From a musical standpoint, a little weird, a little collaborative. And again, these are just tests we're doing. We're just having fun. But that led us into ideas for developing the new version and things like that.
And this extra stick, this is like, it's like a double drumstick now at this point, right?
Right. Yeah. So the prosthesis itself had basically there was the control board, and then there was a stick on the left side of it, and then about 2 inches away there's a stick on the right side. And the stick on the right side was the one that had the mind of its own. So very interesting and experimental and exploratory.
Yeah.
But in musical standpoint, a little experimental for the lack of a better word.
This is really funny because I know like musicians like to be in control of their instrument, and I know that you just have another stick here just doing it, saying you're like, what the hell are you doing, bro? But I mean, that's new. It's definitely new. It's definitely very interesting. I'm eager to know like how involved you were with the design process. I was wondering if you could talk us through some of the features that like you personally helped design and gave feedback on, and yeah, just really how this arm came to life from prototype to the final design.
I had quite a bit of input with the first one, but my main goals with that arm were to be able to control the grip strength of the stick. So essentially, the more that I would flex, so same with like my mile hand, the more that I would flex or extend. So like flex would grip the stick tighter, so then I would be able to get like buzz rolls, right? And then the more I would extend, it would loosen the grip strength, so then I could get like really slow triples and things like that. And I needed to be able to control that in real time, because
Yeah.
that's how playing drums works, and there can't be latency.
Yeah.
Music, it's one of those things like what we never realized, that if we were solving the problems with latency in a lot of these robotics and predictive tech, then it's like you are solving issues outside of just the music world, because latency is a big issue anywhere. If you have a medical robot, you can't have latency, you can't have delay. So with drums, there can't be a delay. I can't think something and then a second later it works, because it just musically it's not going to work. It's going to fall apart. One of the other things that I wanted to do was, because each stick had the capability to play like 19 hits a second. I'm pretty sure. Don't quote me on that. And I thought it would be a really neat idea to be able to utilize MIDI input. So we could actually connect the arm to a DAW like Ableton or Pro Tools and send MIDI signals to it to play like insanely fast things or interesting rhythms.
Yeah. And am I right in saying you got a Guinness World Record for that?
Yeah, Guinness had reached out a while when we first started the project, and they wanted me to do the record for world's fastest drummer or most drum beats per minute, and I declined.
Oh.
Well, I mean, multiple reasons. I do control the arm, but it is a robot, and there are features that are just inhumanly possible. And so, I don't want a bunch of people thinking clankers are taking their job.
Yeah, right.
So I kind of was like, let's do most drum beats per minute with a prosthetic arm. And so that's what we did. It is faster than a human arm, but I just wanted that technicality there, to kind of let the people who are physically the quickest drummers in the world kind of hold their title. And
Oh, you're such a humble musician.
it was more so of just this phenomenal thing that we were able to build. And music isn't a competition for me in that sense, and so I didn't want it to feel like this thing where people just thought I stole the record and it wasn't real. You know what I mean? So
yeah, no, I totally get you, and that's a really refreshing take. The sheer fact that you were able to find a way to play drums again after this accident, that's what it was all about. But I mean, the fact that you've helped create a prosthetic that can, break these records is like such an accomplishment and really cool. I bet there's some people who would like really take that to extreme and go crazy, but you're humble. I respect that. Something else I wanted to ask you is, working with developing prosthetics myself, I know there's a lot of like back and forth, not everything goes right perfectly all the time. And I was wondering if there was like any like massive issues you had with this arm or any sort of like barriers and something you had to get past.
So after the two-stick arm, because it was owned through academia and everything, I wasn't really allowed to utilize the arm the way that I wanted to, or the technology to be able to help other people. And so I had started a Kickstarter to raise money to develop my own version of this arm, upgraded, improved. Long story short, Kickstarter didn't work out. We had some outside funding. It ended up being a collaboration project with Georgia Tech and Google. And so we developed a new improved version of the drum arm that only had one stick. We wanted to design it to where it was lighter. And then it also still had MIDI capabilities, but also it has an accelerometer in it and a gyroscope. So what that allowed me to do is I built a Max patch. Max is a program for like DAWs. You can develop your own effects and instruments and things like that. And so I developed a Max patch that will be able to read input signals from the arm. So it's EMG, and we use pattern rec too. So we have 8 sensors in there that we developed, and information from the gyroscope, etc. And then that can be used to control like external visuals or lights, things like that. And so I didn't want to just stop with making the arm kind of give me my life back, but I wanted it to have other cool features that wouldn't necessarily be considered like cheating, right?
Yeah.
Only limitations right now is, it's bulky, which is something I'm fixing, and then the motor issue, which is also something that's fixed. So I would say we're probably about 95% of the way done with the arm and the final design. And once I'm done with this new one, then I can kind of determine on how much it's going to cost to remake.
Yeah.
And eventually kind of change the design for other things. I'm working on a guitar-based one that essentially would work the same way. The more that I grip, the tighter the pick is, the more that I extend, the looser the pick is. So strumming would become better, tremolo picking would be there, because right now the devices that are available are pretty much just set at one strength, and that's what you get. Right.
Yeah. That's so cool though. This is the first time I'm actually hearing, like you say, of a prosthetic that, is actively moving while it's playing these instruments. Because ours is obviously like an activity attachment. It's one place. Sometimes you need more control over it and things like that. And I, for one, as a professional guinea pig myself testing prosthetics, would love to like tamper with that and like play around and, see how that works. First of all, drumming, like you need so much coordination. And that's another thing to think about, which makes me think you're like insane drummer. But I was also wondering, because wearing prosthetics, like your muscles do get tired, like open and closing. Is that something that you deal with while you're wearing this prosthetic, or is it fine?
Absolutely, especially swinging the arm around. If the arm is not fitted to my residual limb like phenomenally well, after playing 30 minutes, my arm it hurts pretty bad. It was difficult fine tuning it to where while I'm moving my arm around, it's not getting false positives, but I can lightly move my muscles and it's going to activate properly, because if I'm having to move those very hardly while swinging my arm around, my arm will get fatigued insanely fast. And most people who wear Myo understand how those thresholds work for those things. And so if you got to flex really hard to control an arm, you're going to be insanely tired really quick.
Yeah, that's like, I suppose you got to be like so like, incremental movements, and very careful with the sensitivity. But that's so interesting. I definitely do think that's the next step for prosthetics, especially like activity attachments, is that they do something like, and piano as well. I was thinking for piano, like trigger a muscle and you can change chords, because for me at the minute, I have a prosthetic to play piano, but it just does triad chords. And I always thought, if I could like change it to a different chord, that would be great, because at the minute, everything has to be converted into a song made purely out of triads. But how cool would that be to flex a muscle and suddenly something changes? And you were talking about your non-profit. I feel like this will be a perfect opportunity for anybody listening right now who is navigating change or wanting to try out instruments or, you know, feel like they have a certain setback. What would you like to share with those people?
Well, I mean, so, my accident started in 2012, and life kind of took off for me a little bit after we started making the first prosthetics. And I did a big world tour, from Russia to Australia to China. There was a particular moment in Russia where I realized that this was much bigger than me. I performed, I got done, and I was talking to people in the crowd, and I had multiple people in similar situations as me that apparently had been following my story since the first YouTube video came out, and let me know that, they thought they were never able to do these things, or they thought they were never able to play drums. And I gave them inspiration to do that. And I had never experienced that in my entire life. After so many messages from people from all over the world in my inbox, like, hey, like, I saw your videos playing drums, and like, how do I get one of these? How do I do this? And it's like, I can't. This was a one-of-a-kind thing that I did with Google and Georgia Tech, and it's like, I want so badly to be able to give this technology back to people. We decided that I should start a nonprofit for exactly this. And the nonprofit, what we do, it's called Limitless Sound Foundation. And what we do is essentially we provide adaptive equipment such as prosthetics, musical instruments, etc., and an adaptable space, and utilize adaptable software. Whether you're an amputee, whether you have a problem using your hands, whether you are blind, whether you are deaf, anything, we utilize certain softwares and technology to try and get those people to learn how to produce and play an instrument of their choice. Most music instruments they're not, meant for disabled people. They're always meant for able-bodied people. And so, like, at that point, it's never that, like, talent isn't the issue. It's like accessibility is.
Yeah.
Some of the projects we're working on right now with musicians is we're working with a drummer named Will Rowden out of the UK. He actually he's in a wheelchair. He's paralyzed from chest down. He actually basically tapes his his wheelchair pedal to his drum pedal, and he rocks back and forth to activate the kick pedal. Phenomenal.
Genius.
Yeah, and so we're developing a device for him and other wheelchair drummers, because the goal is, why make this for just the individual? A lot of our things are very niche, but this is something that could help a lot of people. Our big thing is we need as much help as possible, whether it's people who want to volunteer for the cause and help the organization, whether it's people who can afford to support and sponsor some of the artists that we're working with, or generally just social media campaigns, things like that. We're really, really looking for people who believe in the mission and want to help in any way they possibly can, because this is something that hits home to me, because I spent my life after I lost my hand trying to figure out how to do these things for myself, because there were no companies doing this. And now, full circle, I'm able to provide this for somebody else. And so I want nothing more than for this to be able to take off and help all of these musicians in need. Talent is the issue. It's accessibility. And there's so many people who spend their whole life thinking, I can never do this, or they're involved in an accident and they think, I'm never going to be able to do this again. And that's the hope I want to be able to give back to people. And it is very, very possible, but we need everyone's help.
Yeah, like you pitched that perfectly, because I mean, you say it's very niche, which it is, some would say, but at the same time, I'm very much that niche. Like, I reckon by now I'd be playing every single instrument if I knew when I was little that I could. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. I personally 100% back this, and if you need any support from us, from Open Bionics' end, or my own personal social media as well, I'm more than happy to reshare or like do anything. I think what you're doing is incredible. Like, yeah, if that had been available when I was younger and looking into it, 100%, I reckon I'd be a multi-instrumentalist like you right now.
Awesome. I really appreciate the support. Yeah, we have a couple of social campaigns we're working on, so I'll share that with you. And then again, to anybody listening or watching, if you guys are interested in helping, again, it's called Limitless Sound Foundation. You can find our website, limitlesssoundfoundation.org, and all of our information is on there. And yeah, I really I want to see this thing take off, and with the support of everybody, and Open Bionics is helping as well. And so we're kind of piecing things together. Like I said, we're still growing, but things are happening faster than I could ever imagine. And so I am so stoked on that.
Hell yeah, Jason, I'm so excited. And also, let's plug you, because you're the coolest. If anybody wants to find you on socials, if you want to share them, where can we find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram for the most part. You can find me everywhere, any socials, but that's probably where I reside the most. My Instagram handle is cybernetics, so it's actually spelled CYBRNETX. Our nonprofit is also on there as well, Limitless Sound Foundation. We're starting to get a little more active on Instagram and kind of building more of a following there. And then you can find my studio, Cybernetic Sound Studio, on Instagram as well.
Hell yeah. And guys, his studio is really cool. It looks
Thank
sick. You should
Thank
definitely check out his studio.
Yeah, not only do we just work with regular artists, but like I said before, we teach disabled musicians and people with other abilities how to produce and play an instrument of their choice. So,
Ugh, just the coolest guy, just an all-rounder for real. Thank you so much, Jason. It's been so lovely chatting to you. Yeah, I'm gonna check out everything you just mentioned. I strongly encourage everybody else to as well. Gonna be jumping on all these campaigns, and this has actually also become my passion project. Like, I want nothing more than for this to take off and for people to know that, music is for everybody. Everybody can play these instruments. Well, they should be able to, like you said. Thank you so much, Jason, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.
Thank you. And I just want to say, I appreciate what you're doing with the podcast as well. So, you're helping a lot of other people kind of in the same situation. So,
thank you, Jason. That's so sweet.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Have those covers been in there the whole time? That is such an amazing initiative. Like, I kid you not. Like, I'm a sucker for music. I love music. If anybody knows me personally, you guys know that I love music. To this day, I literally said this in conversation the other day. Like, if I could play guitar, I'd be playing guitar. As somebody who would definitely be playing, like, 7+ instruments by now, if I 100% knew that I could, it honestly makes me sad to think I'm not doing that because I think I can't. But, like, some instruments aren't accessible, but they should be. And this is where the change happens, right? Please do check them out on all socials. Check out their nonprofit as well. Let's get this off the ground. This is like a mission now. Hell yeah. I really do hope you enjoyed this episode of Tilly Talks Tech. If you did, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Share with a friend. And let me know who else we need to get on the podcast or any topics you want me to discuss down below. What a guy. He's really left an impression on me. I can't wait to supercharge this campaign. I will see you next time.